We do have two public comment opportunities today. Our general comment period will be after the approval of the minutes, and our second comment period for questions and comments on the Clark's Chapel rezoning will be during the public hearing for that rezoning. And if you wish to speak during either one of those times, be sure you have signed up on the sign-up sheets on the table near the door so we can recognize you. And please sign up whether you would like to speak during the general comment or the rezoning, just so we'll know when to put you on. Each person wishing to comment will have 3 minutes to speak. To ensure there are no conflicts of interest for the board, I'll review the North Carolina Statute 160D 109 regarding conflicts of interest for appointed boards. And it says, members of appointed boards shall not vote on any advisory or legislative decision regarding a development regulation adopted pursuant to this chapter where the outcome of the matter being considered is reasonably likely to have a direct, substantial, and readily identifiable financial impact on the member. And appointed board members shall not vote on any zoning amendment if the landowner of the property subject to a rezoning petition or the applicant for a text amendment is a person with whom the member has a close familial, business, or other associational relationship. And is there anyone today who feels like they have a conflict that needs to be?
No.
All right, very good. Then we will proceed. And I think the next thing on the agenda is the roll call of board members.
Nancy Waldrop,
Here.
Carl Kuhn,
Here.
Anthony Coxey,
Here.
Jay Marino, and Liza Shillo. Here. Thank you.
Okay, and now we need to approve the agenda for today. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Then the agenda is good. Then we have the planning amendment approvals. Do I have a motion for that? And this is for 4/21/25.
Motion to approve the minutes is written. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Then the minutes are good to go. And we will open up our general public comment. And before we do that, I will read the rules of the road for our public comment period. The time limit for any individual or representative addressing the board shall be 3 minutes unless a majority of the board agrees to additional time. And a group which is represented by at least 4 people in the audience may elect 1 representative to speak for 10 minutes of time. And each speaker during the public comment period shall be limited to 1 appearance at each regular meeting of the board. The board is not expected to comment on matters brought to the board during public comment. Any individual speaking during public comment shall only address the entire board, and any polling of the board is inappropriate for public comment. Persons addressing the board are expected to observe the decorum of the chamber. The chairperson may rule out of order any comments made during this part of the agenda that are rude, inappropriate, or intended to harass any person or group, or that are not addressed to the entire board, and is authorized to take reasonable and appropriate measures to ensure compliance with these rules unless a majority of the board agrees to overrule the chair's determination. Okay, and with that said, we'll have public comment. Do we have anybody
You
signed
have
up?
the list.
There's nobody signed up.
Oh,
Sorry,
okay.
I thought somebody
Well, very
said-
good.
No. Yeah.
Then we'll close the public comment period and move on to our planning staff presentations, which will begin with ZPH 205-25-00011, Clark's Chapel map amendment rezoning. And we will begin with the staff presentation, followed by the applicant's presentation, if the applicant is here, and proceed from there. Okay?
That's your battery on that. Here.
Good morning. My name is Britton Sluter. I'm a planner with the Long Range team. I did the staff report and rezoning for this, so I will do the presentation.
Yeah. it's-
You gotta talk louder, Brett.
Sorry. All right, can you hear me better now?
If you're talking into the mic, we can hear.
I will do my best. My name is Britton Sluter. I'm a planner on the Long Range Division team. This is ZPH 2025-00011. It's a Clarks Chapel Road map amendment. Thank you. This hearing was properly noticed and all applicable parties notified of the meeting in accordance with general statutes and county code. This included a legal ad in the local newspaper, notices mailed to property owners within 1,000 feet, a notice on the county's website, and a physical posting on the site itself. The applicants are with us today, and they are Hillary and Michael Hatch. The owner of record is Michael Hatch Glass Company. The address, the location of the company on the parcel is 60 Clarks Chapel Road. The area to be rezoned is 0.73 acres. It's one parcel. The current use is a glass blowing studio, and it's on septic and public water. On the left, you can see that the current zoning is R3 and the proposed zoning is CS for commercial service. And the Buncombe County Comprehensive Plan and the GC Future Land Use Map, this is designated as Mixed Use Area 2, which I'll read off a little bit. And that includes large-scale intensive economic development such as industrial or office or industrial flex space, flexibility for commercial and medium-density housing to allow workers to live nearby, focus on campus-style development that promotes internal and adjacent property connectivity, and is compact, walkable, well-connected, and includes mixed land uses. You can see that this is at the top northeastern corner of that. This is from the dimensional requirements table. This chart compares the dimensional standards of the zoning districts. If the rezoning request is approved, the minimum allowed lot size would decrease if it's at some point serviced by sewer. The required setbacks from the property lines would decrease and the maximum allowed height of structures would increase. The type of uses allowed on the property would increase. R3 zoning is higher density but residential only, whereas commercial service is commercial and residential. The surrounding, so I can see this, the surrounding uses are shown here on the screen. You've got across the street, there are two commercial uses, and these are in properties that are zoned CS right now. There's the yard, which is a mulch yard. I believe it has gravel and mulch and so forth. And then there's a pottery and woodworks studio on the other parcel. To the south, adjoining the property, there's Clarks Chapel itself with the cemetery and the church. And then to the west and southwest, to the west, northwest, there's a manufactured home. And then to the southwest, there's single-family residential. For the consistency analysis, as you can see on the screen, is largely consistent with the comprehensive plan. Some examples of that are it has city water. It's in proximity to a transportation corridor, I-26. There are no overlay districts. There's no floodplain. There's a small amount of high moderate stability overlay on it, which is in the southeast portion. And it's in proximity to other commercial areas. In regard to the higher moderate hazard stability areas, it was not deemed sufficient enough to count as being inconsistent, but there is some on there. Based on this, staff recommends approval. I can take any questions you have.
Would you put the zoning map back up?
Sure.
And so this property would abut an existing CS zoning district?
Yes, it'd be
Okay.
across the street.
Just so I know, this one category about higher moderate hazard stability areas, can you just tell me a little bit about what that means?
Do you want me to answer that?
If you'd like.
Not sure I know what that means.
So the higher, that is our slope stability index map. It is on our GIS server. It's data from the North Carolina Geological Survey. And you can either have low, moderate, or high stability. And it's a range of values that is your likelihood of a landslide. This one has a tiny, tiny little block, like minuscule, maybe, I don't know, 5,000 square feet of moderate hazard on the property, but that's it. So that's why we determined it was consistent. It's the majority, 95% of the property, I would say, is out of the moderate area. And if you look at your maps, the more detailed maps we provide you for the property, it should be on there.
Thank you.
Is it a problem not to have septic? I mean, what do they do?
Do you want to answer?
I mean, in terms of the.
I'm trying to go easy on him. It's his first rezoning. There is some in the area, just not on that parcel. And I would say you can tell based on the category on the growth equity and conservation map, it's an area we expect to grow, and probably eventually sewer will be out there. But they do already run the business there. It's a glass studio. And they did get a special use permit to run that glass studio when this property was in Weaverville's extraterritorial jurisdiction. So, I mean, you can run a business as long as you meet all the requirements of small business on a septic system.
Thanks.
I would add to that there is MSD sewer relatively close to the southwest that's crossed I-26. So, and that's also within that mixed use 2 area. So it's already close.
Thank you.
And Kirk just brought up an important point. This was in Weaverville's ETJ for Liza. That was originally in Weaverville's jurisdiction as far as zoning. And when it transferred over and became regulated by Buncombe County, it's actually an existing non-conforming use, a grandfathered non-conforming use. So this would make the property more conforming.
Okay. Any other questions before we hear from the applicant? Okay. Do we have an applicant presentation?
You don't, we're happy to answer questions.
You just want to step up there, sorry. We didn't know we were supposed to prepare something, sorry. You don't have to. so-
If you just state your name for the record.
Hello, my name's Michael Hatch. I'm the owner of the Clark's Chapel property. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Do you mind telling us a little bit about what you do with your business and what kind of glass work you do?
It's a glass blowing studio and gallery. So I make anything from vases and lighting and ornaments to sculptural work. And we've been operating out of there now for over 10 years. And yeah, we're just trying to get things evened out a little bit after the Weaverville thing with doing this special use or whatever. And yeah, we're just trying to come up to speed with our neighbors.
And I'm assuming since there's no one here to speak to oppose this, that the neighbors are fine, especially since it's just it will bring you into compliance with what you're already doing anyway.
The only neighbor who approached me was just concerned that they were going to try and make, that the county was going to try and make him turn his property commercial.
Oh, okay.
And I said, they don't want to do that. I said, we requested it. So that was the only comment I heard from anybody.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
And I just want to make a point, just to make sure everybody's clear, they are in compliance right now.
Right.
with
Oh, okay.
everything. They are a legitimate, grandfather use. The change in the zoning would merely be bringing them, would be basically bringing them, I'm sorry.
The change in the zoning would basically be bringing their use into compliance with the existing zoning for the county.
Thank you. That was a good clarification. Any other questions?
I make a motion to approve based on staff's recommendation.
Public hearing, you gotta.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not
open and
closed, yeah.
close
Yeah.
The
My bad.
public hearing before you can do the motion.
It's okay. No, not a problem. So we will close the public hearing to make that official and,
You gotta open it, then close it.
oh, I thought we did open it.
They did.
They did open it, sorry, then close it. I didn't hear
It's
that
been a
part.
strange morning, but yes. Okay, so we've closed the public hearing and now we are ready to have any type of staff discussion that we would like to have. That didn't get put on the agenda, but we do need to have at least ask for a staff discussion if there's anything we need to discuss.
One quick question for Jillian. When did ETJ actually end? Do you know?
Beaverville?
Just ETJ in general?
I believe I don't have an exact date. My best recollection is sometime in 2019, 20.
It was before that.
It was
You think
before
so?
I
that.
think it was like 2014.
I will get you the date, just so you guys know. I cannot remember off the top of my head. If Nate was here, he would remember, but I cannot remember.
Was it separate for like Weaverville compared to other areas? Or was it all statewide?
It was a statewide,
That's,
and I can try to look that up right now.
no hurry. It's
Yeah,
not.
it was the state legislature
Mhm.
actually said Asheville and Weaverville could not have jurisdiction.
I'm just
So
curious if
20
they knew the year.
2014.
2014. Okay. Thank you.
It was right as we were beginning construction. Everything was a little weird.
Very memorable moment.
Yes. Okay, so just for the public record, I kind of like to read what it is we look at when we make these decisions, and hopefully this helps Liza too. The board must determine if there is a reasonable basis for the requested change in light of its effect on all involved, including the following considerations. The requested change does not directly or indirectly result in the creation of spot zoning, which it did not. The size of the tract in question, compatibility of the change with the adopted 2043 comprehensive plan, which is what Britton just went over with us, and benefits and detriments resulting from the change for the owner of the newly zoned property, their neighbors, and their surrounding community, which apparently there's none of that either. And the relationship between the uses envisioned under the new zoning and the uses currently present in the adjacent tracts. And our board options are, the following options are available to us. One, to recommend approval of the proposed rezoning as it is consistent with the Buncombe County 2043 Comprehensive Plan as presented, or recommend approval of a portion of the proposed rezoning as it is consistent with the Buncombe County 2043 Comprehensive Plan, or recommend denial of the proposed zoning as it is presented, as it is inconsistent with the Buncombe 2043 plan. So what is anyone's pleasure or discussion on this? Found it pretty much all in compliance and consistent, so.
I'll make a motion to approve based on staff's recommendation and the proposed zoning as is consistent with the Buncombe County 2014 Comprehensive Plan.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. We have accomplished that. All right. Congratulations.
Y'all were nervous for nothing.
And this does go to the commission. We just make recommendations, but it will go to the commission and they will kind of go through the same process.
We will let you know when it goes to the Commission. They'll be talking about their budget next month, so it might not be next month, but I'll check with the clerk, okay?
Great, thank you. Thanks for your help.
Well, thanks for being here. Okay, now we will go to ZPH 2025-00012, permitted uses and dimensional requirements, text amendment. This is a work session continued from our last month's meeting, and there will be no public comment during this session. Okay.
Just this one. Let me get this pulled up real quick.
One second, Shannon's trying to get her computer restarted.
Angelica, can you let me into the meeting? I had to restart.
So sorry. Hold on. Okay. You should be seeing the presentation on the screen in just a second. Okay, so we had started looking at this a little bit last week with a summary. This is zoning public hearing 2025-00012, and today is just a work session to review the proposed text amendments to the zoning ordinance for the permitted uses and dimensional requirements tables. So today is not a public hearing. It's just to get you familiar with what the text amendments propose. I let you ask questions, have some discussion, and see what the next steps would be to move towards public hearing for this topic. So we have included a recap from last meeting. The board requested data from the last meeting, and then we will go through the actual proposed text amendment line by line today. And just to recap, the proposal is for the Beaver Dam zoning district to allow up to 2 homes per lot in all zoning districts, to revise and simplify standards in the dimensional requirements and permitted use table, to align the Beaver Dam standards with similar low-density districts like RLD, and to add new disturbance and impervious surface limits to the dimensional table, which does not currently exist. And the map on the right shows the growth and equity and conservation map from the comprehensive plan with Beaver Dam district outlined in blue. You can see the western portion of Beaver Dam is designated as mixed use neighborhood. The eastern portion is rural community. And then later on, I believe we'll look at some maps related to the overlay districts, which is a whole different layer. Oh, here it is. So this is the data that the board had asked some questions about last time. We have a map again of the Beaver Dam district, and in gray is the overlay protection. So that is steep slope overlay and protected ridge overlays. And then in the blue is all of the land in Beaver Dam that is not in one of those protected overlay districts. To the west of that, you'll see it starts to get white. In here, this is all city of Asheville limits. And then the surrounding to the north and east is other areas of the county that have different zoning. They're not zoned Beaver Dam. So when we look at the acreage for this, 71% of the Beaver Dam district, about 2,300 acres, must meet overlay standards, which is much more restrictive than the standard zoning district. And 29%, so almost 1,000 acres, would just meet the regular standards from dimensional requirements table and the permitted use table. So since you all had specific questions about this data, are there any questions about it while we're looking at it?
When you say overlay, you mean steep slope?
Steep slope and protected ridge, so kind of 2 separate standards in the ordinance.
Shannon, can you just go through a quick rundown of the standards in the overlay, especially for Liza, since she doesn't?
Yes, I think I have a slide. Okay, yep. So the overlay standards that we're talking about, so that's 71% of Beaver Dam. The overlay is additional standards on top of the base zoning requirements. So in steep slope, you're looking at an 1.5 acre minimum lot size. If the property is within protected ridge, that minimum lot size is 2 acres. There are significant limits to land disturbance, grading, and impervious surface. So when we talk about adding disturbance and impervious limits to the dimensional requirements table, that is only for parcels not in the overlay. If they end up being in the overlay, they have to meet this higher standard. So whichever the higher standard is, that's what the parcel has to meet. And typically that's going to be an overlay standard. The overlays also have their own height limit. It's typically 35 or 30, is it 35 or 37 feet?
35.
35 feet is steep slope, and 25 feet is in protected ridge if you're within a certain distance of the actual mapped ridge line, kind of the top of that ridge. Protected ridge area also has a building width limit. So the width of your building as measured on the downhill side of the slope cannot be greater than 30% of your lot width. So it's kind of limiting how much you're seeing in that valley of the house sizes. And then for both of those overlays, a geotechnical engineer report is required. That report is meant to show information about slope stability kind of before, during, and after construction, and to also make recommendations about the foundation design based on that slope stability and soil types. And then finally, something else that is unique to overlay standards is a tree screening requirement on the downhill facing side of those structures. They have to have a certain amount of trees to kind of hide the face of the structure from below. And that tree screening is based on the size of the face of the house. So there's some calculations that we do. So these are the standards that the majority of Beaver Dam will have to meet if they're in the overlay, no matter what we decide for the underlying zoning standards. So does that make sense?
Just the height in the overlay is measured differently than the height outside the overlay. And the height in the overlay is an average of the shortest and tallest side of the building, where in any other underlying zoning district, it's just the shortest side. So like you can have a 30, for example, Beaver Dam right now is 35 feet, right?
Mhm.
So you could have a 35-foot front and then a 50-foot, popular on mountains to have a walkout basement and a stem wall, and a 50-foot back. In the overlay, it has to be the average of the shortest and tallest side, so it shrinks the buildings down a little.
Any questions about that?
On the tree screening, is that any tree or is that native species?
So
It's native species.
it does have to be native species, and they can't have all the same tree. They have to have a mix of trees if they're going to be planting. And they have to be a certain distance apart from each other. So there's a bunch of different things we look at for those trees to be counted as actually screening the structure.
And they can do tree credits for existing trees. And that's what lots of people do, is they just maintain the existing trees on the lots. These tend to be heavily wooded lots given the slope of them.
Okay. So you all saw this table at the last meeting. This was the summary of the changes, but now we're going to actually go through the proposed text amendment, the actual wording, and I believe you should have them pulled up on your iPads. And we also, did we provide paper copies of these this morning? Okay. Before we do that, was there any other questions related to the PowerPoint, and then we can get into the paper version? Oh, yep, that's it. Okay. So starting with section 78-581, the definitions, there is a change to remove the last sentence. For purposes of the Beaver Dam District only, front setback lines shall be measured from the edge of the road. This is the only zoning district that has a special way that setback lines are measured. So the proposal is to remove that sentence so that all of the districts measure setbacks the same way.
Why was that there? Was that just because of the terrain or?
Was that a holdover from the original?
It was a holdover from the original Beaver Dam zoning ordinance.
Are there existing roads that maybe do not have an actual recorded right of way?
All over the county, there are existing roads that don't have that might not have a recorded right of way, or might be ditch to ditch. Well, even some of our state roads are ditch to ditch. And if that's the case, we just measure it from the end of the road.
I'm wondering if that building setback should either provide that clarification, or as you've done down in setback where it talks about the property line or the road right of way.
So if it's ditch to ditch, it would be from the property line, because the property line would go to the edge of the road.
But I think under that definition for building setback, you should make it consistent with what it says under setback, either from the road right of way or the property line. Because as it's written now, you're limited strictly to the highway right of way, which may not exist.
Well, that's just for front setbacks. Front setback is either the front of the house, or if it's a right of way. If it's a deeded right of way, it's from that right of way.
Which in fact would be the property line.
Yes. Sometimes
Property
the,
line goes to Senate
So
Road.
why don't they
Yeah.
include or property line?
we can include property line.
We would just need to, we would need to clarify that it was from the property line adjacent to the road. Is that correct? Because the purpose of that statement is about it being the front. So could we say from the highway right of way or property line adjacent to the road? Would that something
Your
of that
setback-
nature?
Your setback definition contains what you need. It just needs to be included up in building setback line. When
Okay.
you say closest to the property line or the road right of way.
And Jillian, can you clarify for us? We'll make up some notes, and then what's the next step for them to see final revisions? Is that just at the public hearing so everybody
Yeah,
understands?
let's think about that one and we'll clarify it, but let's think about how we want to clarify it.
Okay.
And the general purpose of what we're doing is we're just trying to bring Beaver Dam into the same set of regulations that everybody else has, right? All the other zoning.
Correct.
Mhm.
Okay.
Why does the Beaver Dam District have its own, like, what was the original intent?
So back in the late 80s, a long time ago, we did not have countywide zoning. We just had zoning in the Limestone District, which is sort of South Asheville. And then we had zoning in Beaver Dam. Those were the only two areas of the county that had zoning. Then in 2009, we got countywide zoning, and to create countywide zoning, we sort of merged those two zoning ordinances together. The majority of the county is based on the previous limestone zoning ordinance. And this is part, even though we're starting with Beaver Dam, this is part of a larger set of changes to modernize the development regulations and to bring them in compliance with the comprehensive plan. So, and Beaver Dam, I don't think Beaver Dam's been touched since like the mid-90s. So,
And the practical effect between, say, like Limestone and Beaver Dam, is Beaver Dam more stricter so that the setbacks are actually kind of a little further in effect, or is it?
so
more
it
lenient?
depends on the zoning district. RLD is probably the most similar zoning classification in the Limestone, but we had limestone in Beaver Dam before we had our overlay districts. And a lot of what the Beaver Dam zoning district was trying to accomplish is accomplished by our overlay. And we feel our overlay has been around since Jay and Carl, 2010, 2014,
2010, yeah.
2010. And it works really well. It allows people to develop in our more steep terrains safely. But it's a very workable ordinance, and it's not really difficult to meet those regulations. Beaver Dam has some sort of odd nuggets that make it very difficult to sometimes do anything in Beaver Dam. For example, if you have aging parents and you want to build a cottage on your property, you can't do that in Beaver Dam. If you have aging parents or a child who still hasn't moved out of your house, then you can't convert your basement into another dwelling. It's very difficult to survey out a piece of property in Beaver Dam, and it's more expensive because it requires that you calculate the slope for the 2 tracks you're creating or the 3 tracks you're creating. Excuse me. So a lot of the regulations were in place before we had the hillside development regulations for subdivisions and before we had the steep slope protected ridge overlays. Sorry. Okay.
So to a certain extent, the changes that are proposed will ease things in Beaver Dam a little bit, correct?
Yes. Yes. They will ease things a little bit. They will get rid of single family zoning in the county, which is one of the goals set forth in the comprehensive plan. They're simpler. They're easier to understand. They create conformity. And probably when we bring you changes to RLD, which is our residential low density regulations in the rest of the county, they will look like this.
Are we getting the same kind of pushback from Beaver Dam? I mean, apparently not, because there's no one in the room, but I know a few months back, maybe a year back, who knows, there was a lot of controversy from the community about any changes to their zoning. So I was just wondering.
We have not heard anything from Beaver Dam.
Have the
Okay.
residents been informed this is happening? Or is that?
I mean, we have some
time to-
residents that are very checked in and call us on a pretty regular basis. So. And we do have support on the other side. We have some groups in the county who are pushing for more housing to be constructed, and ending single family zoning is the first step in that process.
Which is also kind of a movement across the state, if not the country, right?
Country, I would say.
Okay.
And our comprehensive plan.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Are we ready to move on to setback definition? Okay. So the proposal for amending the definition of setbacks, this is for all setbacks in any zoning district, would be to eliminate the last item except as otherwise provided in the Beaver Dam zoning district, meaning that Beaver Dam would not be an exception to the way that we define setbacks. It would be the same throughout the zoning. Any questions about that? Okay. So next is section 78-640, which is the statement of district intent. Each zoning district has its own statement of intent. And these statements can help us if we get into a situation where we're wondering what the original intention was for the district, and we need to use it to help us interpret something that maybe is not clear in another section of the ordinance, we can use these statement of district intents to kind of get a better feel for which direction we should be moving in making decisions. So this is item J, Beaver Dam Low Density Residential District. And the proposal is to add the word and future. So to protect existing and future development in Beaver Dam Valley from incompatible uses, and to provide for single and two dwelling residential development. So adding two dwelling, currently it's mandatory single family zoning only allowed, and agricultural uses, and then to eliminate the entire last sentence, which talks about topography, access, and all of those other considerations.
Just again, Beaver Dam was created prior to our overlay districts. So our consideration regarding topography and steep slope is now built into our overlay districts.
And into our hillside standards.
Yes, and into our hillside subdivision standards.
Any questions or comments on that section? No? Okay. Next is section 78-641, which is permitted uses. And this is the section that contains the permitted use table. You will notice there's some areas where we had conditional use crossed out. This was something that, this was an edit that was supposed to have already happened. The state had changed the language from conditional use permit to special use permit. So we are not going to be making those changes as part of this text amendment. That's something that'll happen to the whole ordinance to update that language. So we don't really need to worry about the wording change on that. But what's happening here? Oh, wow, this is all funny. So if you look at the table, each column is for a different one of our zoning districts. Beaver Dam is the second to last column. And I'm sorry, this printed really weird. We are proposing in the Beaver Dam column to permit 3 use types that are not currently allowed. That includes 2 residential dwelling units attached or detached. It includes subdivisions, which are alternative path hillside subdivisions and conservation development subdivisions. So those are the types of subdivisions that allow you to cluster development into the less steep areas of the property in order to help protect or conserve steeper areas, more environmentally sensitive areas, and to reduce the amount of disturbance and impervious surface that is going into that development. So it's another option that we have to try to allow them to construct homes without impacting so much of the environment.
Shannon, can you just explain for Liza what a hillside subdivision is?
Sure. So if someone were to come in with a subdivision proposal, let's say it's 10 lots, and they wanted to build it in a steeper area of the county. So is it over 25% slope? So let's say the entire parcel is 10 acres. They want to do 10 parcels, and that entire property is over 25% slope. Naturally, it's going to be considered a hillside subdivision. So whether or not it contains areas in the overlay, we're going to be looking at a different set of development regulations for how they designed the actual subdivision. So hillside doesn't look at individual home construction in terms of what each house has to do. It looks at what the subdivision developer has to do in designing the lots and the road infrastructure and where all that can go. So each lot, in addition to the overall slope dictating how many lots you can do, each individual lot is also calculated for how big that lot has to be. So it's very, very dependent on the overall slope of the property, and it's also dependent on the slope of each individual lot that you're proposing. Something like an engineer would have to calculate all of that for us. But in essence, it limits development, but it also provides options through the alternative path and conservation options to be able to cluster development to potentially increase density by preserving more of the property rather than spreading everything out and having to build a ton of roads. So there's a lot of options, and it really is to encourage developers to kind of keep things denser and more compact so that we can preserve the natural forest and steep slope areas.
Was
Does
that project we did off of Mills Gap about a year or so ago, was that under that regulation?
So that one is an alternative path hillside development.
Is it?
And within that alternative path hillside development, if you do a conservation easement, which is what they are doing, you can reduce your average natural slope for the property. So like the more, like if they do a conservation easement, they get more, get more density down at the bottom and get more reductions in lot sizes and setbacks and those sort of things.
So that was one of these, right?
Yes, that was alternative path hillside development with a conservation easement, which reduced their average natural slope calculation.
So another way to put this is right now, if you wanted to do a subdivision in Beaver Dam, you would have to spread it across the entire parcel and build a ton of roads. By adding the alternative path and conservation option, it means that people can still do the same amount of lots, maybe get some extra ones, but they would have to cluster it so that they are not going so far out into those more sensitive areas of the property. So that's the intent, is to allow that clustering.
And by more sensitive areas, you mean more sloped or where does the
Steeper
slope-
areas. There's a couple different types of areas that are considered worthy of being part of the conservation section. So I think it's things like wetlands, steep slope overlays, protected ridge. There's a number of kind of high and medium priority conservation areas that you can count as part of your conservation area. But the point is to keep it primarily out of those steepest portions where you have the highest landslide and other risks.
So alternative path hillside development is for steep properties. That would be a hillside development, so that over 25% slope. So a lot of that is preserving the really steep portions of the property and preserving the ridge from development. And then the conservation subdivision development is an option if you just want to conserve either farmland or forest land. We have not had anyone choose that option. So it's probably something we will be coming back to you and looking at and seeing if we can make it a little more tempting for developers to use that option. And again, these sort of conserving these big tracts of land, that big swaths of land sort of fits in not only with the comprehensive plan, but with the county's goals to conserve 20% by 2030. Is it by 2030? 20% of land by 2030. And in general, the push in development regulation has been to keep people off or limit development on those steep slopes.
Any idea why there's been no conservation development projects?
So it's a carrot and a stick thing. It always is with those type of developments. So I think we just have to talk to some developers and see how big we have to make the carrot to lead them in that direction.
Any other questions about that section? No? So now we're looking at section 78-642, which is the dimensional requirements section. And in that, we are specifically looking at table 2 of dimensional requirements. And this is where we see a number of proposed changes to the Beaver Dam zoning district. The first column is minimum lot size in square feet. And the proposal is to eliminate footnotes 6 and 8 as a reference and to match it to the format of all of the other zoning districts, which would be a 30,000 square foot minimum lot size for any properties that are not on public sewer. So these are septic system properties. And then 20,000 square feet minimum lot size if the property is served by public MSD sewer. And then we're looking at the density column. There's two of them. The first one is minimum land area per dwelling unit, and that's also in square feet. Proposal is to remove the footnote reference and the limit of no more than 1 unit per lot. Currently, if you have 1 acre property, you can only do 1 home. If you have 200-acre property, you can only do 1 home. So that's what that means. And that would be proposed to be changed to no more than 2 units per lot. The second column under density is maximum number of dwelling units per acre. Proposal is to remove the footnote reference and to match it 2 units per lot. Then we're getting into the minimum yard setback requirements, and these are broken into 3 different categories. There's front yard, side, and rear, and then you'll see it repeated in gray. That is, so the first one is for if you are on public sewer. That's the first 3 columns, and then in the gray, the 3 gray columns is if you are on a septic system, private septic. So for public sewer served properties, the proposal is to remove the footnote reference and to make the setbacks 10 feet on the front, 10 feet on the sides, and 20 feet on the rear. And if the property is served by private sewer, it would be the same 10, 10, and 20 for setbacks. There's no proposed change to the maximum height. And then there is the proposal, actually disturbed and impervious should be in red because that is a whole new column. So proposing to add a new column to the table, which is for limits to disturbed and impervious surface, and that's based on the lot size acreage. And for Beaver Dam specifically, the proposal would be that there is no limit to disturbed and impervious if the lot is less than half an acre. Or excuse me, yes, so no limit for half an acre. From half an acre to 1 acre, it would be an 80% limit on disturbance and 60% on impervious. For 1 to 4 acres, it would be 60% limit on disturbance and 45% on impervious. From 5 to 9 acres would be 40% disturbance and 30% impervious. And then if you have a lot that's over 10 acres, it would be 30-20 split.
And just to note right now in Beaver Dam, there is a limit, but it is in acreage. So it's 0.75 disturbed and 0.35 impervious. So that works fine for smaller lots, but that also means if you have a 20-acre lot, a 10-acre lot, a 200-acre lot, you can only disturb 0.75 and 0.35. So we have had cases where we had really big lots and, you know, a single family house on a very big lot, and they cut in the driveway and they meet the disturbed and impervious limitation for Beaver Dam. So that doing it by acreage makes it very, very difficult sometimes to just build a house on a lot.
So going by percentages, you can sort of adjust your development pattern to meet the
Size of the lot.
size of the lot. And the second thing that this column does is just prevents that kind of development where they just bulldoze everything and start anew.
Yes.
So this kind of requires a certain amount of natural existing to remain.
Yes, except for under 0.5 acres, because under 0.5 acres, if you're doing a septic tank lot, if you're, that's not a lot of land. And and remember, this would apply to the 20% that's outside the overlay. In the overlay, we have percentages, but they're much higher.
Mm-hmm.
They are
It's a 15 and 8%.
15% disturbed, 8% impervious. So again, in those steeper areas and along the ridge, there's stricter requirements because you're trying to limit development in those areas.
Is the addition of a septic system to like a less than half acre lot, is that considered disturbed? Are you disturbing when you add
It
that?
is considered disturbed outside the overlay. In the overlay, we give them a sort of an exemption for septic systems. and they don't count towards your disturbed in the overlay.
I'm not sure if I'm reading this right, but on density 2 and 4, the maximum number dwelling units per acre, 2 units per lot. So if I have a 4-acre lot, I can have 8.
If you have a 4-acre lot, you can have 2. So that's the way RLD is written right now.
It just seems confusing. Because I'm looking at it, I'm going, oh, okay, I got 4 acres. I can do it.
It's the 2 columns, and we might try to simplify that in a future regulation. Again, this is legacy from the limestone. We have lots of extremely strange things in our zoning ordinance from limestone and beaver dam. And those were written in the 70s and early 80s. So that might be something we look at when we bring you more changes to this dimensional table, is clarifying that. It makes sense in like R3 or R1 or R2, where you can do, like R3, you can do multifamily, but it doesn't make sense in those districts where we only allow 2 houses per lot.
So you're saying a lot can be 2 acres or 4 acres or whatever, but whatever the size of the land, you can still only have
2 houses.
They'd have to
Based on
subdivide in order to get more houses, basically.
Current beaver dam, people run into trouble subdividing because of and it's more expensive because you have to calculate slope.
Once you get back up there, it's all steep.
Mhm.
All steep.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Whole
70% of that district is in the overlay district.
Back to this column about disturbed and impervious, we do have one lady that shows up that's always concerned about impervious.
Mhm.
In that regard, these numbers, were you like not applicable below half an acre and then 80, 60, 60, 45, 40, 30? Where did those come from? Are those national standards or planner standards, or can you give me a little background on how that column is created?
So we talked to our stormwater and erosion control staff, and we ran some formulas based on what it would take to develop a typical lot in a steeper area in terms of, a typical driveway, the amount of grading that is required for that. And I think we looked at like a 1,800 square foot home. So we wanted to make sure that someone could achieve development of a reasonable size home and still be able to get their septic system in, have their a well house potentially, be able to accommodate any required minimum parking, and be able to develop those site without allowing for mass grading in those kind of areas, because a lot of mixed use neighborhood and rural community in the comprehensive plan, the intent is not for it to be super high density development. So while the overlay will protect against that in those more western parts of the property that we showed earlier, that yellow MUN, any of the areas that are outside of the overlay, we still want to kind of preserve that kind of lower density feel to those communities, even though they're not in the overlay necessarily. So we're looking at the blue.
So this column also kind of helps with the perception of density by maintaining a certain amount of undisturbed acreage. Is that right?
Yes, so there's a number of things in this table that limit density. So 2 per lot is the most significant one. Limits on disturbance and impervious definitely restricts how much you can develop that land. And then, of course, maintaining the height limit and setbacks also kind of limits what you can do. And we have pretty high minimum lot sizes. 30,000 square feet is the highest lot size we have for our districts other than RLD currently. And then the next step up for lot sizes would be things like our hillside subdivision standards or our overlay standards.
And so if you had a really small lot, like in the Beaver Dam Valley, and you went to put the driveway scenario in that you talked about earlier, but you designed it in a way where when the driveway was complete, it stayed gravel instead of paved or concreted, that counts towards the impervious aspect?
Yes, compacted gravel counts just like paving for impervious.
All right, so you're maintaining the impervious, but you got a little bit of disturbance there, correct?
Yes, so the disturbance is going to be calculated based on where they're doing any land disturbance. So not just the base of the road, but if they have to do a cut and fill slope to get in there, if they need to, fix a landslide area, all of that's going to count towards their land disturbance maximums.
And I guess, given this column, they almost have to do a lot of pre-planning to make sure they're hitting this column, correct?
So when we have these more specific disturbance and impervious limits, they do typically have to talk to a surveyor, an engineer, sometimes a landscape engineer, or architect can help out, but it's not typically something that a normal applicant can do on their own. Sometimes they can, but many of them would choose to get help from a design professional.
I mean, we already require through our site plan permit process for you to indicate how much disturbed and impervious there is. And a lot of the builders in the county are very used to it and know how to do it. But lots of people would, talk to a landscape architect or an architect or a surveyor. Any of those professionals could do it for them if they didn't feel comfortable doing it.
And I know I'm doing a lot of questions, and I apologize, but one
That's
last
what we're here
question.
for.
One last question on that column. Are there other counties or other districts in North Carolina doing that right now?
Yes, so we looked at a number of different municipalities to see how they organize their disturbance table, and we tried to find ones that had more mountainous topography similar to us and used that as kind of a guide as we were running different formulas for those percentages.
Thank you.
Does
Great
it-
info.
Henderson County.
I'd have to look and see who we looked
I
at.
remember specifically that Henderson County has a similar column in their dimensional requirements.
Thank you for all that.
Would you think the city of Asheville zoning in the area adjacent to the outside overlay district is more or less restrictive than what ours is?
It is more restrictive.
Less restrictive.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's less restrictive. A couple of years ago, there had been a townhome community going in, and that was right in one of these parcels. So there's a pretty significant difference in density of what is allowed in the city compared to what's in the county. But you can also see on this map, this orange line is the sewer line. So it's really hard when you're on the ground to tell where the city and the county line end because there are a lot of infrastructure still in that lower, less steep portion compared to when you get further back into the coves.
That wouldn't preclude a parcel selecting voluntary annexation to come under the city's zoning ordinance?
I mean, voluntary annexation, anyone could request that. But they would be, they would have less, they'd have more development options if they chose to be annexed into the city.
Are they dramatically different as far as development options? I like his question.
Right now, I would say they are because they allow those townhomes and those attached housing. And we currently Beaver Dam doesn't allow that, and we wouldn't be allowing that with these regulations. So you have an area where you can do townhomes, and then you move into an area where the most you could do was duplexes. If we change the regulations.
That would go back to the community a little bit too, who really does not want that type of development, do they? The community, Beaver Dam community, do they want that type of development?
The townhomes?
Yeah.
Based on our conversations with the city of Asheville, no, it created quite a controversy when those were built. There are some, and I think one of them is in our jurisdiction. Like there are some very old townhouse communities and like condominium communities out in Beaver Dam that were built prior to our ordinance, but the Beaver Dam community has always been very clear. They don't want that type of density.
That's what I thought. Thanks.
And those couldn't be built today under the current or the
No.
proposed standards.
Okay.
Any other questions about this row of the table? Okay, so the next proposal is to eliminate footnotes 7 through 9 applicable to Beaver Dam Residential District only. That's right underneath the table. And all of the rest of the proposals are just to eliminate those specific footnotes. So footnote 7 is Beaver Dam only development standards. Those are to be replaced with the new disturbance and impervious limit column in the table. And what the current table in footnote 7 is, it is regulating minimum lot frontage, minimum lot size, and then maximum disturbance and impervious based on the percent of natural slope of the particular lot. So the way that currently works is you have a parcel, you have to calculate the percent natural slope of your lot, and that tells you how wide that lot needs to be if you're creating a new lot for subdivision, minimum lot size, and then if the lot's already existing, it dictates the maximum disturbance and impervious. So the proposal is to eliminate that table so that you would just use the limits of the dimensional requirements table, or if you're in the overlay, you would have to do the higher overlay standards instead. Any questions on that? No? Okay. Next is eliminating footnote 8, which is, this is the Beaver Dam only setback requirements for front, side, and rear setback, and that is currently based on the percent of natural slope of the lot. And by eliminating that, you would instead use the minimum setbacks from the dimensional requirements table when determining how far back that structure has to be. Questions on that?
Seems to have simplified it a great deal.
Yeah. Okay, footnote 9 would also be eliminated, and this is how to calculate natural slope based on this formula. And so the reason that we would eliminate that is that we would not be asking them to provide us with the percent natural slope in order to determine which of their minimum lot sizes or frontage they would have to meet. So we do still have a definition of natural slope in our subdivision ordinance, but they would not have to do that kind of calculation when creating, just one lot or when just coming in for a permit to do a house, essentially. Are there any other scenarios they would have to use that calculation?
No,
Think of?
no. And I will note, again, Beaver Dam was prior to the overlay district. This is natural slope, so it's the average over the whole tract. So the average over the whole tract, it might be 20%, and you have a really flat portion, and then you have straight up a mountain, right? The overlay standards are based on actual slope, natural slope. So that is how we created that, is we used LiDAR to create and pinpoint the areas that are above 25% slope. So it's a much more accurate sort of view of what's going on that property than using that average slope.
Which was always my criticism before that district came in, because people were, the way they were chopping up huge tracts of land and submitting them for subdivision approval, went right around that.
Yeah.
They were able to get more density when now they got the overlay. They don't get to cheat that anymore.
Exactly.
When we did the comprehensive plan, we got quite a bit of comment from Beaver Dam. So I think I know pretty well where they're at on things. My question is, since this draft has been put out, have you heard anything from like home builders or developers, what their view of going to a more consistent countywide standard in that district?
We haven't talked to any of them.
we will probably take it to that, we'll probably let the Asheville Home Builders Association, they're not called that anymore. I can't remember what they're called. And the Realtors Association know when it changes. I mean, over the years, I have had surveyors, a lot of surveyors, because the surveying in Beaver Dam, since you have to calculate those slopes, it's just a lot more work. It's a pain. And, I've talked to home builders. They're just tough regulations to get anything built in Beaver Dam. So I would assume that they would, anytime you make your regulations easier to understand, slightly less restrictive, builders tend to be happy.
Especially since it seems like the overriding opinion is that you guys make it difficult for them, and here's one where you're making it less difficult, so.
Yeah.
We are going to try in all of the text amendments we bring you over the next coming years to simplify as much as possible. So that's one of our goals as we're looking at all these ordinances, is how can we still meet all of our goals, but make it easier to understand, less complicated where it is appropriate.
Reduces some upfront development costs as well,
Yeah.
which goes in line with trying to get more affordable housing.
Well, and along those same lines, and this question doesn't apply to what we've just been talking about, but it does apply to the whole regulation thing and some bills that are floating around in Raleigh that I've gotten questions about. What is our Buncombe County's position on setbacks, not setbacks, but parking limits at this moment?
So we are currently working on parking revisions to our parking table. And what you have to realize that we have sort of more developed areas, and then we have areas rural out in the county where, it's not as dense, where there's no public transportation. And we are looking at the chart. What the chart looks like now for the draft is more maximum and minimums, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
But depending on the use, some of the uses just have minimums and no maximums. And then for our residential ones, we are looking at having parking standards for those, because we feel like it's important to have parking standards for those, given that, again, we don't have public transportation all over the county. You're dealing with rural development areas, suburban development areas, and more dense development areas. And those are all sort of different scenarios where you would need different things. But again, loosening the regulations, making them less restrictive in a lot of ways, trying to clarify them as much as possible. Our parking table is very much doesn't cover all our uses. We've added uses. So we'll be bringing that to you in the future. When, I don't know. Probably the next thing that we're going to bring to you is we still have some donut holes in the county from countywide zoning. So we do have some areas that are currently not zoned. We actually don't have full countywide zoning because we have some areas that are currently not zoned. And we're going to bring those to you first and finally close those holes and have officially countywide zoning. And lighting is almost ready to go. So probably we'll bring you lighting. And that one, and then maybe parking.
But we've been researching a lot of the kind of parking theories and things happening around the country. So I think you'll see a lot of proposals that are different from what we currently have in the ordinance.
Okay. That's good information. Thank you.
So we do reference the APA's parking guide, which is kind of a compendium of different levels of parking based on type of use from all over the country. So we look at that to see what different municipalities are doing. And then we also research, different places in North Carolina or further out to see if there are innovative ways that we could approach parking. And some of the things that we've seen are the maximums or things like reducing the minimum number. A lot of places are just eliminating requirements. So all of that has been part of our research to see what might work for this area.
On the lighting portion there, are we already regulating for light pollution, or will that come in with the changes you're proposing?
The original lighting ordinance was to regulate for
Access.
excess. But one example, for our lighting ordinance currently, right now, you have to get a lighting engineer to do a photometric plan for you. And we are trying to come up with ways where if you have all, what are they called, Shannon?
Wall packs. What are we
Uh,
talking about?
yeah, but full cutoff wall packs, if you have only a certain number of lights, not having to do a photometric. So we're trying to come up with ways to make development easier, but still, like Shannon said, accomplish our goals.
Thank you.
So for the current text amendment, are there any conversations, questions that we can work through before we decide on next steps?
I'm good.
Are we good to schedule a public hearing for that one, we think?
I think so.
Do we have consensus for that?
I think so.
I think so.
Then we will schedule a public hearing for July. If you would let us know if you're going to be away for vacation on either the July or August meeting, because we are, like I said, we're going to bring the donut holes. We have this public hearing to schedule. So if you're going to be away, sometimes summer gets a little sketchy. Or no, it would be the June meeting.
I was just going
It
to ask
is
that
the June
question.
meeting?
Yeah, it would be the
Okay.
June meeting. June meeting, we would do the public hearing, and then July, we will probably bring you the donut holes. But let us know if you're going to be gone so we can schedule things around you guys.
Because we do need a quorum.
Yes, you do need a quorum. Thank you, Liza.
June will be my last.
Yes.
July, Heather's on vacation, I can't.
And June will be Terry's last meeting last planning board before she retires in August.
We hate that.
He doesn't.
I know.
And if you guys don't, that is it. That's all staff has for you.
And I think we can make a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Good, we are done.